When you walk into a pharmacy, pick up a prescription, or see an ad on TV for the next big thing in health, you probably don't think twice. It feels like science is doing its job, right? Brilliant minds in labs, discovering cures, helping humanity move forward. But you see, what if I told you that behind the glossy labels and reassuring voices in those commercials, there's a reality most people never see? One that's not just about medicine, but about power, money, and influence. Now let's be clear, modern medicine has saved lives. There's no question about that. Antibiotics, vaccines, surgeries, they've changed the world. But the pharmaceutical industry, that's a different beast. It's not just about health, it's a multi-billion-dollar empire with profits bigger than most tech companies. And when that much money is involved, the lines between helping people and making money can get blurry, really blurry. Take this for example. Did you know that in many countries, the same drug, literally the same pill, can cost 5, 10, even 20 times more depending on where you live? It's not because of shipping or manufacturing, it's because of deals made behind closed doors, deals you and I aren't supposed to know about. Pricing isn't always based on what's fair, it's often based on what the market can bear. And by market, they mean us, patients, people. And then there's the whole issue of marketing. You've probably seen those cheerful, emotionally charged ads on TV telling you to ask your doctor about some medication. In fact, the US and New Zealand are the only two countries in the world that allow direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical advertising. That means drug companies don't just sell to doctors. They sell to you. They convince you to ask for a brand-name drug instead of a cheaper, equally effective alternative. They use emotional hooks, smiling actors, slow-motion walks on the beach, all to make you associate their pill with a better life. But here's the thing, sometimes those drugs are rushed to market. Sometimes the testing isn't as thorough as it should be. And sometimes the side effects aren't even fully understood until it's too late. Remember Vioxx? It was a painkiller approved in the late 90s, aggressively marketed, sold by the millions, and then pulled off the market after it was linked to thousands of heart attacks. Thousands. But by that point, the company had already made billions, and that's just scratching the surface. Behind every glossy commercial and slick brand is a web of lobbyists, financial incentives, clinical trials that never see the light of day, and patents that keep affordable generics off the shelves. And if you think the regulators have it all under control, well, let's talk about that next. So let's talk about the people who are supposed to keep us safe, the regulators. Agencies like the FDA in the US, the EMA in Europe, they exist to review drugs, to make sure they're effective and safe before they reach you. In theory, that sounds reassuring. But in reality, things get complicated. Fast. Here's something most people don't realize. The majority of funding for drug approval departments in these agencies doesn't come from taxpayers. It comes from the pharmaceutical companies themselves. Yep, the very companies that are seeking approval for their products are the ones funding the process. Imagine being a referee in a game, where one team is also paying your salary. That's not oversight, that's a conflict of interest. And it doesn't stop there. Many officials who work inside these regulatory agencies, after a few years they leave and end up working for the very companies they once regulated. It's called the revolving door, and it's one of the quietest, most dangerous aspects of the whole system. Because when regulators are thinking about their next job while making decisions today, whose interests are they really protecting? But okay, let's say a drug passes all the hurdles and hits the market. Great, right? Well, here's where it gets even darker. Clinical trial data, the evidence used to prove a drug works, is often selective. Only the most favorable studies are published. Negative results? They're either buried, reworded, or never see daylight. So what doctors and patients are shown is a carefully curated version of the truth. And if a researcher or scientist does try to speak out, that can come at a huge cost. There have been cases of whistleblowers, people inside pharmaceutical companies or academic institutions who raised red flags only to be silenced, sued, or blacklisted from the industry. Careers destroyed, reputations ruined, all for trying to prioritize patient safety over corporate profits. And all the while, these companies are pushing drugs with billion-dollar advertising campaigns, with glossy brochures in doctors' offices, and with aggressive lobbying that makes sure no laws are passed to make pricing more fair or data more transparent. In fact, the pharmaceutical industry spends more on lobbying than any other sector in the US, including oil, defense, and even tech. That's how powerful they are. Still, many people think, well, if the drug works, what's the problem? But here's the twist. Sometimes the drugs being pushed don't even offer significant improvements over older treatments. They're just newer, more expensive, and better marketed. Meanwhile, generics, which are far cheaper and just as effective, are quietly swept aside. Why? Because you can't make billions off a pill that anyone can produce. And if all this sounds manipulative, that's because it is. But we're not done yet, because the influence of pharmaceutical companies doesn't just stop at regulators and advertising. It reaches even deeper, into your doctor's office. Let's get into that next. Now, here's where things hit closer to home: the relationship between your doctor and the pharmaceutical industry. You walk into a clinic or hospital expecting unbiased advice, right? But what if I told you that even your doctor might be caught in a web of influence they don't even fully recognize? Let's break this down. Pharmaceutical reps, also known as drug reps, are trained not just in the science of medicine, but in the psychology of persuasion. They show up at medical offices with free samples, sponsored lunches, all expenses paid trips to conferences, and sometimes even honoraria for speaking at events. All of this is legal. All of it is normalized. But what it creates is a cozy relationship where trust can quietly shift into subtle obligation. It's not that doctors are evil or corrupt. Most of them genuinely want to help. But imagine being bombarded every day by smiling reps, glossy brochures, free perks, and polished talking points. Over time, that influences prescribing behavior, even if unintentionally. And the kicker? Studies have shown that even small gifts, like a $20 meal, can impact which medications doctors choose to prescribe. So the next time your doctor reaches for the prescription pad, you have to wonder, is it the best treatment for you, or the most heavily promoted one? But wait, it goes even deeper. Medical schools and continuing education programs, the places where doctors are trained and kept up to date, are often sponsored by pharmaceutical companies. That means the information future doctors are learning might already be biased, shaped by the interests of the people funding the content. It's subtle, but powerful. You're shaping a mindset before a doctor even sees their first patient. And what about medical journals? You might assume these are the gold standard, peer-reviewed, objective, science-based. But pharmaceutical companies often fund the studies, write the papers through hired ghostwriters, and then recruit a respected academic to sign off as the author. It gives the illusion of independent research, when in reality it's a carefully crafted piece of marketing. This isn't about conspiracy, it's about influence. It's about a system that rewards profit more than prevention, marketing more than medicine, and brand loyalty more than patient outcomes. You're starting to see the pattern, right? Every level, from regulators to doctors to the research you hear about on the news, is connected by invisible threads leading back to one thing: money. And here's the hardest pill to swallow. The consequences of this system aren't just ethical dilemmas. They're real. People end up on medications they don't need. Side effects go unreported. Life-saving treatments are priced out of reach. And lives are lost. Not because we don't have the science, but because the business of medicine got in the way. But it's not all hopeless. In the final part, we'll talk about what can be done. Because change doesn't come from silence. It comes from understanding. And now that you see the full picture, you'll never look at a prescription bottle the same way again. So now that the curtain's been pulled back, the big question is, what do we do with all this? It's easy to feel overwhelmed, or even cynical, when you see how deep the rabbit hole goes. From corporate lobbying to biased research to the way your doctor may unknowingly be influenced, it can feel like the system is too broken to fix. But here's the thing, systems don't change by themselves, people do. And when enough people start asking the right questions, demanding transparency, and refusing to settle for surface-level answers, change becomes possible. Let's start with awareness. Just by watching this video, you're already ahead of the game. Most people go through life assuming that healthcare is purely a matter of science, cause and effect, symptoms and cures. But now you know there are layers. There are interests, and that awareness, that sense of skepticism. It's not paranoia, it's protection. Next, ask questions, a lot of them. When you're prescribed a medication, don't just take it at face value. Ask your doctor why they chose that particular drug. Ask if there are non-drug alternatives. Ask if the drug is new, or if it's been around long enough to have a reliable safety record. A good doctor won't be offended. They'll respect that you care enough to take an active role in your own health. Now let's talk about transparency. In some countries, laws have been passed that require pharmaceutical companies to publicly report payments to doctors. You can literally look up whether your physician has received money, meals, or gifts from drug companies. Tools like the Open Payments database in the US are a step toward accountability, but they only work if people actually use them. So use them, and what about the industry itself? Can we hold it to a higher standard? Yes, but not without resistance. Pharma companies aren't going to voluntarily reduce their profits or unspin their marketing. But public pressure works. Social media campaigns, watchdog journalism, and patient advocacy groups have already forced companies to disclose more, pay fines, and rethink certain practices. That only happens when people refuse to stay silent. But let's also acknowledge the complexity. Not every pharmaceutical company is evil. Not every drug is unnecessary. The industry has created life-saving medications, vaccines, antibiotics, treatments for chronic illnesses. Millions of lives have been improved. That matters. This isn't about demonizing the whole system. It's about shining a light where shadows have been allowed to grow for too long. The truth is, healthcare should be a human right, not a business strategy. Medicine should be about healing, not profit margins. And we, as the people who fund, use, and rely on this system, have every right to demand better. So what now? Now you take this knowledge and carry it with you, not as a burden, but as armor. The next time a drug ad flashes across your screen promising a miracle cure, you'll look deeper. The next time you read a study, you'll wonder who paid for it. And the next time someone tells you that the system is broken beyond repair, you'll remember this. Broken things can be rebuilt, but only if we start with the truth. Thanks for sticking with me through this. If this opened your eyes, even just a little, share it. Talk about it. Be the spark that starts a bigger fire. Because the truth about the pharmaceutical industry, it's not just something to expose, it's something we all need to understand before it's too late.